She slapped the Mafia boss thinking he was a drunk bully. He whispered, "Do that again, I dare you." The strobe lights of the onyx carved through the smoke like knives, every flash syncing with the thud of bass that shook the floor beneath my heels. This wasn't my scene, not with its designer criminals and predatory glamour, but tonight I'd chosen chaos over another evening buried in legal briefs. The yellow dress had been a statement, a middle finger to the monotony of my paralegal existence. Now, surrounded by designer suits that cost more than my rent, I realized I'd painted a target on my back. I lost myself in the music, letting my body move, trying to silence the voice in my head that cataloged every exit, every threat. Then I felt it, fingers gripping my waist like I was property, digging through silk with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Not again. Not tonight. Rage ignited faster than thought. I pivoted hard, my hair a dark whip across my vision, and my palm connected with flesh and bone. The impact sang up my arm, sharp and satisfying. Crack. The sound cleaved through the pounding music. Conversations died mid-sentence. The DJ's hands froze over the turntables. In the sudden pocket of silence, I heard my own breathing, ragged and defiant. Then I looked up, way up, and my stomach dropped into my shoes. This wasn't the sweaty drunk who'd been bothering me earlier. This jaw was carved from stone. This neck bore ink that crawled from a pristine white collar like beautiful poison, intricate designs that told stories I suddenly didn't want to read. And these eyes, they held the kind of darkness that didn't just threaten. They promised. Nino Amando. Even the name in my head felt dangerous. The crowd had stepped back, creating an arena around us. 2 mountains in expensive suits materialized at his shoulders, their jackets falling open to reveal the unmistakable outline of weapons. Marco and Vinny, I'd heard the names whispered in the courthouse hallways. Their faces wore identical masks of disbelief, hands drifting toward their holsters. But Nino simply raised one tattooed hand, and they froze like trained dogs. He touched his cheek where my handprint was already blooming crimson against his olive skin. Then his mouth curved, not with anger, but with something infinitely more terrifying. Amusement. Interest. He closed the distance between us in one smooth step, and suddenly his lips were at my ear, his voice a dark silk ribbon wrapping around my throat. "Do that again," he murmured, the words vibrating through my entire body. "I dare you." Welcome back to our channel. Before we see if Layla survives this mistake, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Also, please like and subscribe to join the family. Let's get started. I didn't remember leaving the Onyx. One moment I was drowning in those dark eyes. The next I was stumbling onto the rain-slicked pavement, my lungs burning as I gulped down air that tasted like freedom and gasoline. My heels clicked a frantic rhythm against the concrete, too loud, too exposed, but I couldn't make myself slow down. Behind me, the club's entrance glowed purple and gold, a beautiful trap I'd barely escaped. Or had I escaped? His words still clung to my skin like expensive cologne. "Do that again. I dare you." A cab materialized like a prayer answered, and I threw myself into the back seat, rattling off my address before the driver could even ask. My hand throbbed where it had connected with his face, and I cradled it against my chest like evidence of my own stupidity. Through the rain-streaked window, the city blurred into streams of neon and shadow, and I tried to convince myself I was just another girl heading home from a bad night out, but I could still feel his breath against my ear. The apartment was dark when I stumbled through the door, and for one blessed moment I thought Maya was asleep. I could slip into my room, peel off this cursed yellow dress, and pretend tonight had never happened. But the living room lamp clicked on, and there she was, curled up on our sagging couch in her forensics lab hoodie, wine glass in hand, murder podcast playing softly from her phone. "There she is," Maya said, pausing her show. Her smile died the second she saw my face. "Layla? What happened?" I kicked off my heels and they skittered across our hardwood floor like accusations. My legs felt boneless, and I collapsed onto the couch beside her, suddenly exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness. Maya set down her wine and turned to face me fully, her dark eyes scanning me with the same intensity she used to examine crime scene photos. "I did something stupid," I said finally, my voice cracking on the last word. "How stupid are we talking? Like, drunk texted your ex stupid, or committed a felony stupid?" She was trying to joke, but concern leaked through her words. Somewhere in between. I pressed my palms against my face, then immediately regretted it when my right hand screamed in protest. "I hit someone." Maya blinked. "You, Layla Sutherland, future attorney, champion of justice and proper legal procedure. You hit someone? At a club? He grabbed me. The words came out sharper than I intended, defensive. Some guy put his hands on me and I reacted. I didn't think. I spun around and slapped him so hard the entire club went silent. Good. Maya's voice was fierce, and she squeezed my knee. He deserved it. They always deserve it. The trash who think women are. Maya. I cut her off, and something in my tone made her freeze. It wasn't the drunk guy who'd been bothering me earlier. It was someone else. Someone standing behind me. Okay, so you hit the wrong guy. That's not ideal, but he had tattoos on his neck. The detail had been seared into my memory, intricate and terrible. Beautiful ones. They came up from a white collar, really expensive suit, and his eyes. Maya, everyone stopped. The music cut out. These two massive guys with guns. Maya's face had gone pale, her bronze skin suddenly ashen in the lamplight. Wait, neck tattoos, white collar, 2 bodyguards. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Layla, what did he look like? I closed my eyes and he was there again, tall and solid and far too close. Dark hair, slicked back, strong jaw. The tattoos were like art, intricate, and he had this presence, like gravity bent around him. Everyone in that VIP section knew him. Oh God. Maya stood up abruptly, her wine sloshing dangerously in the glass. Oh God, Layla, tell me you didn't. Didn't what? Dread coiled in my stomach like a serpent. She was pacing now, one hand pressed to her forehead like she could physically hold back panic. The Onyx is on the east side, right? VIP section, neck tattoos, 2 bodyguards, white suit. She spun to face me, and I'd never seen her look so terrified. Layla, that wasn't a drunk. That was Nino Amando. The name hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard it before, whispered in courthouse hallways, muttered by prosecutors over coffee, breathed like a curse by public defenders who knew their clients would never testify against him. Nino Amando, the ghost who left bodies but never evidence. The king of the criminal underworld who'd never spent a single night in jail despite 3 decades of law enforcement trying to cage him. No. The word came out weak, unconvincing even to my own ears. No, that's not possible. He would have killed you? Maya finished, and she looked at me like I was already a corpse. Yeah, he should have. Nino Amando doesn't let people disrespect him and walk away. They call him the Butcher of the Bronx, Layla. He once made a man who stole from him disappear so thoroughly that even the dental records vanished, and you slapped him. In front of his entire crew. The room tilted sideways, and I gripped the couch cushion to keep from sliding off the world. His face crystallized in my memory with new context, not just handsome, but infamous. Not just dangerous, but lethal. And I'd struck him. My palm still tingled with the memory of contact, and now I understood why the impact had felt like hitting stone. Men like him weren't made of ordinary flesh. He smiled, I whispered, more to myself than to Maya. After I hit him, he touched his cheek and smiled. Maya stared at me like I'd grown a second head. He smiled, and his guards pulled guns, but he waved them off. Then he leaned in close and whispered. I couldn't finish. The memory of his voice wrapped around my throat like a velvet noose. What? Layla, what did he say? I met her eyes, and the truth tasted like ashes. He dared me to do it again. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant wail of sirens, a sound that suddenly felt like it might be coming for me. Maya sank back onto the couch, her wine forgotten, and we sat there in the lamp's yellow glow like 2 girls waiting for the monster to find them in the dark. Because now I understood the worst part. Nino Amando knew exactly who'd struck him. He knew my face, probably already knew my name, and instead of killing me on the spot, he'd let me walk away, which meant this wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't sleep. Every creak of the old building, every distant siren, every shadow that passed across my bedroom window felt like a countdown to something inevitable. Maya had wanted to call the police, but what would I say? That the city's most untouchable crime lord had whispered in my ear and let me walk away? They'd laugh me out of the precinct. Or worse, they'd put me in a system that couldn't protect me from a man who'd corrupted half of it. So when dawn finally bled through my curtains, I dragged myself out of bed, pulled on my most armor-like blazer and pencil skirt, and decided that routine was the only weapon I had left. I was a paralegal at Morrison & Hale, a fortress of law and order. Nino Amando's world didn't touch mine in the daylight. It couldn't. I was wrong. The moment I stepped off the elevator onto the 14th floor, I knew something was different. Samantha from reception had gone statue still, her phone pressed to her ear but her words dying mid-sentence. Marcus, one of the junior partners, stood frozen outside his office door, coffee cup suspended halfway to his lips. And every single person I passed tracked me with eyes that held a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. "Layla," Samantha breathed when I reached the reception desk, and she said my name like it was a obituary. "Your office, someone sent you, you should just go look." My heels clicked against the marble floor with a rhythm that felt like a funeral march. The hallway to my small paralegal office stretched impossibly long, and I could feel the weight of a dozen stairs drilling into my spine. When I rounded the corner, I stopped so abruptly I nearly stumbled. Yellow roses. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. They flooded my office like a golden tsunami, arranged in crystal vases that probably cost more than my monthly salary. They covered my desk, lined the windowsill, climbed up the filing cabinets. The scent was overwhelming, beautiful and suffocating and absolutely deliberate. The same shade as the dress I'd worn to the Onyx. My hands shook as I pulled the card from the arrangement on my desk. Heavy cardstock, expensive. The handwriting was sharp and confident, each letter a small act of possession. Consider these an even exchange. You marked me, I've marked you. And, Jesus Christ, Layla, who did you piss off? My boss, Gerald Hoffman, appeared in the doorway, his perpetually rumpled suit somehow looking even more disheveled than usual. But his eyes weren't angry. They were afraid. These came at 7 this morning, 3 guys in black suits, very polite, very efficient. They said they were from a concerned admirer. I couldn't breathe. The roses seemed to pulse with an energy that had nothing to do with their beauty and everything to do with what they represented. A message, a claim, a warning. I need to... The words stuck in my throat. I'll take my lunch early. I didn't wait for permission. I grabbed my purse and fled back toward the elevator, desperate for air that didn't taste like expensive flowers and implied threats. But when the elevator doors opened to the lobby, I learned the most important lesson about running from monsters. Sometimes they're already waiting at the finish line. Nino Amando sat in one of the lobby's modern leather chairs like it was a throne, his long legs crossed, one arm draped casually over the backrest. The same white shirt from last night, but now paired with charcoal slacks and a watch that could pay off my student loans. His neck tattoos were on full display, a deliberate choice that made every corporate lawyer and paralegal in the lobby give him a wide berth. Marco and Vinny flanked him like bookends, their suits unable to disguise what they were. He saw me the instant I stepped out of the elevator. Something flickered in his dark eyes, triumph maybe, or satisfaction, and he rose with a grace that made my chest tighten. Every eye in the lobby tracked his movement as he crossed the polished floor toward me, and I heard Samantha gasp from her desk. "Miss Sutherland." His voice was smooth, cultured, nothing like the dark whisper from the club. This was his public face, the businessman who donated to children's hospitals and sat on charity boards. "I hope you received my gift." I should have run. I should have screamed. Instead, I stood there in my sensible heels and professional blazer, feeling like the only thing between me and a loaded gun was whatever incomprehensible interest had kept me alive this long. "What do you want?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Dinner." He said it so simply, like he was asking about the weather. "Tonight, 8 o'clock, I have a table reserved at Dante's. I'm not having dinner with you." His smile was slow, dangerous, the same one from the club. "That wasn't a question, Layla. May I call you Layla? I feel we're past formalities, given that you've already left your handprint on my face." He gestured to his cheek where, impossibly, the faintest shadow of a bruise still lingered. "I want to continue our conversation. I don't owe you anything," but my voice wavered, because we both knew that wasn't true. In his world, disrespect was a debt, and debts always came due. "No?" He stepped closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne, cedar and smoke, and something darker. "You're a paralegal. You understand contracts, yes?" You struck me. I could have responded in kind, but I chose not to. "That makes you indebted to my mercy. All I'm asking for is a few hours of your time. Seems like a bargain to me. That's not how the law works. Lucky for both of us, I'm not talking about the law." His eyes held mine, and I saw something flicker in their depths that made my stomach flip. Not anger, something worse. Interest. 8 o'clock. I'll send a car to your apartment. 412 West 23rd Street. 3rd floor, the one with the fire escape outside the bedroom window. He delivered my address like a caress and a threat. You have good locks, by the way. But you should really get cameras. It's a dangerous neighborhood. The implication hit me like ice water. He knew where I lived. He'd probably known before the roses, before this morning, maybe even before I'd walked into the Onyx. And now he was framing his stalking as concern, wrapping surveillance in the language of protection. I could report you, I said, but it sounded hollow even to my own ears. To whom? He tilted his head, genuinely curious. The police? Half of them are on my payroll. The DA? We play golf together. Your boss? He glanced toward the elevator like Gerald might materialize. I could buy this firm before lunch and make you a partner by dinner. But I'm not interested in forcing your hand, Layla. I'm simply offering you a choice. Dinner with me, or dinner without my protection. Because the moment you slapped me, every set of eyes in that club locked onto you. Some of those eyes belong to people who don't have my sense of restraint. So this is protection? My laugh was bitter. You're threatening me to save me from other threats? I'm stating facts. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and straightened the collar of my blazer with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. Wear something nice tonight, but not yellow. That color belongs to me now. Then he turned and walked away, Marco and Vinny falling into step behind him. The lobby exhaled collectively, and I stood there trembling with rage and fear and something I refused to name, watching the devil walk out through glass doors into the midday sun. The black car arrived at 7:45, idling outside my building like a sleek predator. I'd told myself a dozen times I wouldn't go, that I'd call his bluff, that there had to be a way out of this web he was spinning around me. But Maya had looked at me with those terrified eyes and said, "If you don't go, he'll just come get you." At least in public there are witnesses. So I'd chosen a simple black dress, not the armor of my work blazer, but not the vulnerability of yellow silk either. Something that said I was here under duress, not desire. My hands shook as I applied lipstick, and I hated that they did. The driver didn't speak as he opened the door for me, didn't meet my eyes as we pulled into traffic. The city slid past my window in a blur of light and shadow, and I tried to memorize the route, the turns, anything that might help if this went sideways. But 20 minutes later, when we stopped in front of an unmarked door in a neighborhood I didn't recognize, I realized how foolish that hope had been. Marco was waiting at the entrance, his expression professionally neutral. "Miss Sutherland." He's inside. The restaurant, if you could call it that, was a single room. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs casting warm amber light, a table set for two in the center like an island. No other diners, no staff visible. Just Nino, standing by the table in a black suit that probably cost more than my car, his neck tattoos stark against his white shirt collar. "You came." He said it like he'd never doubted, and that made my jaw clench. I didn't have much choice. There's always a choice, Layla. You just didn't like the alternatives. He pulled out a chair, the gesture almost gentlemanly, if you ignored the fact that I'd been coerced here. "Please, sit." I sat because my legs were shaking, not because he'd asked. The chair was expensive, comfortable, probably hand-carved. Everything in Nino Amando's world was expensive and comfortable and soaked in blood money. He took the seat across from me, and I was struck again by how the lamplight caught the edges of his tattoos, making the ink seem to move against his skin. Up close, I could see details I'd missed in the club, geometric patterns that wove into organic shapes, symbols I didn't recognize, dates written in Roman numerals along his jawline. "Wine?" He gestured to a bottle that had already been opened, breathing. "I'd rather keep my wits about me, thanks." His smile was brief but genuine. "Smart. I like that about you. Most people are so eager to dull their fear that they don't realize it's the only thing keeping them alive. Is that what I should be? Afraid?" "Aware," he corrected, pouring himself a glass. "Fear makes people stupid. Awareness keeps them breathing." A door I hadn't noticed opened, and a man in chef's whites appeared with 2 plates, something that looked like art arranged on porcelain. He set them down without a word and disappeared just as silently. I stared at the food, wondering distantly if this was how it ended. Poison disguised as fine dining. "It's safe," Nino said, reading my hesitation. "I don't poison people, Layla. It's impersonal. If I wanted you dead, you'd already know it. That's not as comforting as you think it is." He laughed a real laugh, startled and warm, and for a moment he looked less like a crime lord and more like a man who found genuine amusement in my defiance. "Eat. You'll need your strength for this conversation." I picked up my fork because not eating felt like giving him power over even my basic needs. The food was exquisite, each bite exploding with flavor I couldn't quite name. We ate in silence for a few minutes, and I used the time to study him. Really study him. The tattoos were mesmerizing. They started somewhere beneath his collar and climbed up his neck in a pattern that seemed both chaotic and perfectly planned. A crown of thorns wrapped around the base of his throat. A compass rose marked his pulse point, and woven through it all were words in languages I couldn't read and symbols that looked ancient. "You're staring," he said without looking up from his plate. "You invited me to dinner. What did you think I'd do? Ask questions." He set down his fork and leaned back, giving me his full attention. "You're curious. I can see it fighting with your disgust." "I'm not curious." "Liar." But he said it without heat. "You want to know about the ink. Everyone does. They just don't usually have the courage to ask. I shouldn't engage. I should eat in silence, endure this dinner, and go home. But the paralegal in me, the part that built cases on understanding, motivation, and evidence, couldn't help herself. Fine. What do they mean? The tattoos." He reached up and traced the crown of thorns at his throat with one finger, a gesture so casual it had to be practiced. "They're a map. Each one marks a sin I've committed, a choice I've made, a line I've crossed. This one," he touched the compass, "was for the first time I chose the criminal path instead of the straight one. I was 16. A man was beating his pregnant wife in an alley. The police wouldn't come to our neighborhood, said it was a domestic matter. So I handled it myself." "Handled it how?" His eyes met mine, dark and unflinching. "I put him in the hospital for 3 months. The wife and baby survived. He never touched her again. I wanted to condemn it, to cite the law, to explain that vigilante justice was still violence. But the words stuck in my throat because I'd seen enough case files to know he was right. The law didn't protect everyone equally. It failed in neighborhoods like the one he came from. That doesn't justify a criminal empire, murder, extortion." He finished for me, his voice sharp. "No, it doesn't. But tell me, Layla, with your black and white view of justice, what happens to the people the law forgets? The single mothers in rent-controlled buildings who get evicted by developers with lawyers on retainer. The shop owners who can't afford protection from gangs because the police response time in their neighborhood is 40 minutes? The system isn't perfect, but breaking it doesn't fix it. I'm not breaking it. I'm filling the cracks it left behind." He leaned forward, and I caught that scent again, cedar and smoke and danger. "In my neighborhood, kids walk to school safely because my men patrol the routes. Small businesses don't get shaken down by thugs because everyone knows they're under my protection. The law fails them daily, but I don't. You're a criminal, and you're a paralegal who's probably helped rich men escape justice more times than you can count." His words were a scalpel, precise and cutting. "Tell me, how many sexual harassment cases has your firm settled with NDAs? How many wrongful termination suits have you buried in paperwork? You serve the law, but does the law serve justice?" I wanted to slap him again, wanted to storm out, wanted to prove him wrong, but I couldn't. Because I'd spent 3 years at Morrison and Hale watching powerful men buy their way out of consequences while victims signed away their right to speak for settlement checks that barely covered their therapy bills. "I'm trying to change it from the inside," I said, but it sounded weak even to my own ears. "And I'm protecting people from the outside. We're not so different, you and I. We're nothing alike." "No?" He stood and rounded the table, and I should have flinched away, but I didn't. He stopped behind my chair, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. "You struck a man you thought was hurting you. You didn't call for help, didn't wait for authority. You took justice into your own hands. That's the most honest thing I've seen anyone do in years. I made a mistake. You were magnificent." His voice dropped to that dark whisper from the club, and I felt it in my spine. "You looked at what you thought was a threat and you eliminated it. No hesitation, no apology. That's not the law talking, Layla. That's survival." He moved back to his seat, and I could breathe again. The food sat heavy in my stomach, and every word he'd said wrapped around my convictions like vines, squeezing until I couldn't tell where my beliefs ended and his logic began. "Why am I here?" I asked finally. "Really, why didn't you just kill me and be done with it?" His smile was slow, dangerous, genuine. "Because you're the first person in 10 years who's looked at me and seen a man instead of a monster, even if it was only for the second before you realized who I was. And because," he raised his wine glass in a mock toast, "I think you're starting to realize that monsters are just men the world forgot to protect." I spent the next 3 days trying to convince myself that dinner had been a singular nightmare, a contained incident I could file away and forget, but Nino had other plans. The text came on Thursday morning, direct and impossible to ignore. Tonight. Wear pants. Heels are impractical for where we're going. N. I should have blocked the number. Should have changed my locks, quit my job, moved to a different state. Instead, I found myself standing in my bedroom that evening, staring at my closet like it held answers instead of clothes. Maya watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression caught between concern and something that looked disturbingly like fascination. "You're going again," she said, not a question. "I don't know what happens if I don't." The admission tasted like defeat. "Layla, you're a paralegal. You know how this story ends. Women who get tangled up with men like him don't just walk away when they're done." "I know." I pulled out black jeans, boots with enough heel to feel like armor but practical enough to run in if needed. "But what's the alternative? Pretend he doesn't exist? He sent roses to my office, Maya. He knows where we live. Ignoring him won't make him disappear." She was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "Just be careful. And keep your phone on. I'll have 911 ready to dial." The car came at 8, same driver, same silence. But this time, we didn't head toward a restaurant. We drove deeper into industrial territory, where the streetlights grew sparse and the buildings wore their decay like badges of honor. When we finally stopped, it was in front of a warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside graffitied walls. Broken windows covered with plywood, the kind of place where bodies turned up in crime scene photos. Marco was waiting again, but this time Vinny stood beside him, and behind them I could see more men, a lot more men. They parted as I approached, creating a path, and their eyes tracked me with a mixture of curiosity and respect that made my skin prickle. Inside, the warehouse was anything but abandoned. The main floor had been converted into something that looked like a private club leather seating areas, a full bar that gleamed with top-shelf liquor, and in the center, a poker table where 5 men sat beneath a cone of light that made everything else fade to shadow. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. Nino stood near the bar, and when he saw me, his face did something complicated. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. He was in shirt sleeves tonight, no jacket, his tattoos fully visible as they crawled down his forearms in patterns that seemed to pulse in the low light. He crossed to me in 3 long strides. "You came." His hand found the small of my back, possessive and warm. "I wasn't sure you would. Your invitation wasn't exactly optional. Everything is optional, Layla. You just keep choosing to stay." He guided me toward the table, and I realized with creeping dread what I was looking at. This wasn't casual poker. The chips stacked in front of each player represented more money than I'd see in a lifetime. And the men around the table, I recognized 2 of them from case files that had crossed my desk. Violent offenders who'd walked because witnesses disappeared. "Gentlemen," Nino announced, his voice carrying authority that made everyone sit straighter. "This is Layla. She's with me. Show respect." The words hung in the air like a decree, and I watched 5 dangerous men nod in acknowledgement. One of them, salt and pepper hair, scar across his knuckles, actually stood and inclined his head to me, like I was royalty instead of a paralegal who'd wandered into the lion's den. "You play?" Nino asked, pulling out a chair. "Poker?" "Not at these stakes." "Then watch. Learn." He sat, and I realized he expected me to stand behind him, to play the role of the mobster's girl, ornamental and silent. Every feminist bone in my body screamed in protest. But I also saw the calculation in his eyes. This was the test he'd mentioned. Not of my loyalty, but of my ability to exist in his world without breaking. So I stood behind his chair, close enough to see his cards, close enough to feel the tension radiating off the other players. The game started, and I watched Nino transform. The man who'd whispered dark promises in my ear disappeared, replaced by someone colder, sharper. Every gesture was measured, every word chosen with precision. He read the other players like I read legal briefs, finding weaknesses and exploiting them without mercy. "Your father send his regards?" one player asked, trying to sound casual as he raised. "My father's retired," Nino replied smoothly, calling. "But I'll pass along your concern when I visit him Sunday." Another player shifted uncomfortably, his tell so obvious I could read it from where I stood. Nino saw it too. His hand moved to his chips, then paused. He reached back without looking and found my wrist, his fingers wrapping around it gently, pulling my hand forward until it rested on his shoulder. The gesture was casual, intimate, deliberate. Everyone at the table saw it. "All in," Nino said, pushing his entire stack forward. The player folded immediately. So did the next 2. Only the man with the scar stayed in, and when the cards were revealed, Nino's straight beat his 2 pair. The pot, easily 6 figures, was pushed across the table, but Nino didn't even look at it. He looked at me. "What did you see?" he asked quietly, for my ears only. "The 3rd player." His jaw tensed when you mentioned your father, and his breathing changed when you went all in. Nino's smile was slow, dangerous, proud. "She sees," he announced to the table, and there was something in his tone that made my chest tighten. Not possession, recognition. "My Layla sees everything." The game continued, and I found myself drawn into its rhythm despite myself. I started noticing things the way Vinny would appear with a drink before Nino asked for it, how the other players deferred to him on every decision. The respect that bordered on fear. This wasn't just a poker game. It was a demonstration of power, and I was part of the show. "Layla," Nino said during a break, turning in his chair to face me. "Do you know why they all stood when you arrived? Because you told them to respect me." "No." His hand came up to cut my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Because I've never brought a woman here before. In 10 years of running this city, I've kept my personal life separate. But tonight, I'm showing them you're not separate. You're part of this, part of me." The warehouse suddenly felt too small, too warm. Around us, dangerous men played poker with blood money, and I stood in the center of it all, my hand on a crime lord's shoulder, feeling safer than I'd felt in my entire life. The paralegal in me screamed that this was wrong, that I was being seduced by power I should be documenting as evidence. But another part of me, the part that had slapped him without thinking, that had survived in a system designed to break women like me, recognized something else. In Nino's shadow, I was untouchable. And God help me, I was starting to like how that felt. "Take me home," I whispered, but we both knew I didn't mean my apartment. His smile promised everything and nothing. "Not yet, Bella. First, you need to learn to shoot." The shadows started following me on a Tuesday. I noticed the black SUV first, same model, different plates each day, always 3 cars back. Then came the man in the coffee shop who ordered nothing and left when I did. The woman at the bus stop who got off at my building despite living nowhere near my neighborhood. I would have written it off as paranoia if Maya hadn't grabbed my arm one morning, her face pale, and pointed out the 3rd obvious tale in as many days. "Layla, this is bad. This is really bad." She was right, but I didn't know how bad until Nino showed up at my apartment that night without warning. I opened the door to find him flanked by Marco and Vinny, his face carved from stone, fury radiating off him in waves that made the air feel electric. "Pack a bag," he said without preamble. "Excuse me?" He pushed past me into the apartment, and Maya scrambled off the couch, her podcast forgotten. His eyes swept the space like he was cataloging exits and vulnerabilities, and when he turned back to me, something in his expression made my stomach drop. "Don Ricci knows about you, the girl in the yellow dress who slapped Nino Amando and lived to tell about it." His voice was controlled, but I could hear the rage underneath. "He's put 50,000 on your head. Not to kill you, that would be too clean. He wants you alive so he can use you as bait." The room tilted sideways. Maya made a sound like a wounded animal. I gripped the back of the couch to keep standing. "How? How does he even know I exist?" "Because I brought you to the warehouse. Because I've been seen with you. Because..." He cut himself off, jaw clenching so hard I could see the muscle jump. "Because I broke my own rule. I let them see you matter. So this is my fault?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "I slapped you, and now some rival crime lord wants to kidnap me? That's what I get for defending myself? That's what you get for being mine." He closed the distance between us, and his hands came up to frame my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about this moment. Ricci's been looking for a weakness for 3 years. Now he thinks he's found it, and he's right. The admission hung between us, heavy and terrifying. Maya was crying quietly on the couch, and I realized with sickening clarity that she was in danger too. Anyone connected to me was a target now. "What do you want me to do?" My voice cracked. "Let me protect you. Really protect you. Not just shadows at a distance, full coverage. Marco and Vinny, 24/7. They'll take you to work, bring you home, vet anyone who gets within 10 feet of you." He paused, and something in his eyes softened. "I know what I'm asking. I know it's a cage. But it's the only way to keep you breathing until I handle Ricci." I wanted to argue. Wanted to cite my independence, my right to live my life without armed guards and constant surveillance. But the memory of those shadows following me, the sick knowledge that someone had been watching, Waiting for the perfect moment to strike it turned my defiance to ash. For how long? However long it takes. Marco moved into position by my apartment door that night and didn't leave. Vinny took up residence in a car outside. And I learned what it meant to be Nino Amando's weakness wrapped in his protection. The first day wasn't terrible. Marco drove me to work in the armored SUV, walked me to the elevator, and stationed himself in the lobby. Colleagues stared, but I told myself they'd stared at the roses too. This was just another spectacle to endure. The second day, Marco insisted on walking me to my office, standing outside the door while I worked, following me to the bathroom. The walls started closing in. By the third day, I couldn't breathe. Every coffee run required approval. Every lunch break came with an armed escort. I couldn't grab drinks with Maya, couldn't go for a run, couldn't exist without someone watching, evaluating, protecting me from a threat I couldn't see but felt everywhere. I'm suffocating, I told Nino when he called that evening. Marco was in my living room, Vinny outside my door. Maya had started sleeping at her boyfriend's place because having armed guards in the apartment made her panic attacks worse. This isn't protection. It's prison. It's temporary. But his voice carried a weight that said he knew what he was asking cost more than money. How temporary? A week? A month? The rest of my life? I was pacing my bedroom, my voice rising despite knowing Marco could hear every word. I can't live like this, Nino. I'm not built for cages. You think I don't know that? The snap in his voice was sharp, frustrated. You think I wanted this? Richie's playing a long game, Layla. He's waiting for me to slip, for you to slip. One mistake and you disappear. So yes, you get guards. Yes, you lose your freedom. Because the alternative is, I find pieces of you in a warehouse. The image hit me like a physical blow. I sank onto my bed, phone pressed to my ear, tears burning behind my eyes. I saw the file, he continued, quieter now. I saw what he did to the last woman he used as leverage. It took her 3 days to die, and he sent photos every 6 hours to make sure his message was clear. So forgive me if I'm not apologetic about keeping you alive. Before you judge Layla's situation, let's be real. Predators like Richie, who hurt innocent people to get ahead, are the lowest form of coward. If you hate bullies who prey on the vulnerable instead of facing their enemies head-on, smash that like button right now. Let's show these cowards we don't stand for their garbage. Only cowards will keep scrolling. The file arrived the next morning via encrypted email, Nino's way of proving he wasn't exaggerating. I made it through 3 photos before I had to run to the bathroom and throw up. Marco knocked on the door, asked if I was okay. I wasn't. I wouldn't be for a long time. But I understood now. This wasn't Nino being controlling. This was Nino showing me exactly what monster was hunting me, making sure I knew the stakes weren't theoretical. Still, understanding didn't make the cage easier to bear. By the end of the week, I'd stopped going to the office. Too many variables, too many ways for things to go wrong. I worked from home with Marco stationed at my dining table, his gun visible on his hip, a constant reminder that my life had been reduced to this. 4 walls, 2 guards, and the suffocating weight of being someone's weakness. I hate him, I told Maya over video call, the only way we could talk now. I hate that he made me a target. I hate that his world is swallowing mine. I hate that I can't even walk to the bodega without an armed escort. But you don't hate him enough to leave. She was right. God help me, she was right. Because every night, Nino called, and every night, I answered. We talked about everything and nothing, his childhood in the Bronx, my dreams of law school, the tattoos I hadn't asked about yet. He made me laugh despite the guards outside my door. Made me feel like a person instead of a liability. But feeling like a person in a cage was still a cage. I can't do this, I told him on day 10. I can't be your weakness, Nino. I won't live the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for your enemies to use me against you. So either you handle Richie, or I walk away. I'll leave the city, change my name, disappear so thoroughly that I stop being a weapon pointed at your head. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, you'd leave. To get my life back? Yes. Even knowing what Richie would do if he found you without my protection. Maybe he wouldn't look for me if I wasn't connected to you anymore. Another silence. When he spoke again, his voice carried something I'd never heard from him before. Fear. You're wrong. He'd hunt you just to prove he could, just to show me that even my mercy has consequences. But if that's what you want, if you'd rather run than trust me to end this, then go. I won't stop you. He hung up. Marco was watching me from the dining table, his expression unreadable. Outside, The city hummed with life I couldn't touch. And I stood in my apartment, holding a dead phone, realizing I'd just given an ultimatum to the most dangerous man in New York. Now I just had to wait to see if I'd freed myself or signed my own death warrant. The guards disappeared the next morning. I woke to silence. No Marco at my dining table. No Vinny outside my door. No engine idling on the street below. Just the ordinary sounds of my apartment building. Pipes groaning, Mrs. Chen's television through the wall, the distant wail of sirens that had nothing to do with me. Freedom felt like falling. Maya came home that afternoon, her key turning in the lock with a hesitance that said she'd been testing whether it was safe. She found me on the couch, still in my pajamas, staring at my phone like it might ring. It didn't. He actually let you go, she said, dropping her bag and sinking into the chair across from me. I didn't think he would. Neither did I. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. I gave him an ultimatum. Handle Ricci or I walk away. He chose option 3, let me walk away before Ricci makes the choice for us. That's good, right? That's what you wanted. Your life back. Yeah. I looked around my apartment, the same space I'd lived in for 2 years, suddenly feeling like a stranger's home. My life back. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like I'd amputated a limb to escape a trap. And now I was bleeding out, wondering if the cure was worse than the disease. I went back to work on Monday. Gerald did a double take when I walked into the office, like he'd expected me to be dead or disappeared. The yellow roses were long gone, replaced by a new intern's Spider-Man mug and a stack of client files. It was like Nino Amando had been a fever dream, a beautiful nightmare I'd finally woken from. Except I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, couldn't stop cataloging exits and potential threats. Every man in a dark suit made my pulse spike. Every black car that slowed near the curb sent adrenaline flooding through my system. I'd traded the cage of protection for the prison of paranoia, and I wasn't sure which was worse. You look like hell, Samantha said on Wednesday, catching me in the break room as I made my 3rd coffee of the morning. And I mean that with love. Are you okay? Just tired, catching up on work. The lie sat bitter on my tongue. She studied me with eyes that had seen too many associates burn out, too many paralegals crack under pressure. The roses guy, he's gone? Yeah, he's gone. Good. Men like that. She shook her head. They're beautiful until they're not. Better you got out now. I nodded because agreeing was easier than explaining. How could I make her understand that Nino had never felt dangerous to me? That the monster everyone else saw had looked at me like I was something rare and chosen? That I'd felt safer in his presence than I had in my entire life? I couldn't. So I smiled and took my coffee back to my desk and pretended that filing motions and reviewing depositions was enough to fill the crater he'd left behind. Nino called on Friday. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the decline button while my phone buzzed in my hand, his name on the screen like an accusation. But my traitorous heart won out, and I pressed accept. Layla, just my name, but the way he said it felt like coming home. What do you want? I kept my voice cold, professional. The same tone I used with opposing counsel. To see you, one last time. There are things I need to say. We said everything we needed to say. No. His voice was rough, raw, in a way I'd never heard. You said you were leaving, and I let you go because I won't keep you in a cage. But you don't get to walk away thinking you're doing the right thing, the legal thing, the moral thing. You don't get to use the law as a shield between us. I'm a paralegal, Nino. I'm going to be a lawyer. I put guys like you in jail. That's what I do. That's who I am. The words came out stronger than I felt. You and me, it was never going to work. I was delusional to think otherwise. Guys like me. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Say it right, Layla. Say what you really mean. Criminals. Murderers. The filth you scrub off society's conscience before you go to sleep, feeling righteous. Yes. The admission burned. That's exactly what I mean. Silence stretched between us, filled with everything we weren't saying. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, deadly. Meet me tonight. Dante's, 9 o'clock. Hear what I have to say, and if you still want to walk away, I'll let you go for real this time. No more calls, no more flowers. I'll become the ghost you need me to be. Nino, 9 o'clock, or don't come, and we end it here, over the phone like cowards. He hung up before I could respond. Maya was against it. This is how it starts, she said, pacing my bedroom while I stared at my closet. One last meeting becomes one last night, becomes one last week. Before you know it, You're in too deep and there's no way out except in a body bag. It's a public restaurant. What's he going to do? Murder me over pasta? No. He's going to look at you with those eyes and say the exact words you need to hear, and you're going to fall right back into his orbit. She grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. Layla, you're my best friend. My sister. And I'm watching you make a mistake that could cost you everything: your career, your future, your life. Please, don't go. But I was already reaching for the black dress, the same one I'd worn to the warehouse. I need closure. I need to hear him out so I can move forward. That's not closure you're looking for. That's permission. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was looking for Nino to give me a reason to stay, to prove that his world wasn't incompatible with mine. But I owed him this much: one final conversation, face to face, where I could look him in the eye and mean it when I said goodbye. The cab dropped me at Dante's at 8:55. Same private room, same table set for two, same amber light that made everything feel like a dream. But this time, Nino was standing by the window when I walked in, his back to me, shoulders tight beneath his suit jacket. He didn't turn when the door closed. I wasn't sure you'd come. Neither was I. I stayed near the door, keeping distance between us like a barrier. You said you had things to say, so say them. He turned then, and the sight of him hit me like a fist. He looked tired, not physically, but soul deep, exhausted. The kind of tired that came from carrying weight no one else could see. His tattoos seemed darker in this light, the ink stark against his skin like evidence of every choice that had led him here. I love you, he said it simply, without flourish, like he was stating a fact. I didn't plan to. I didn't want to. But that night at the Onyx, when you looked at me with rage instead of fear, something in me recognized something in you. We're the same, Layla. Two people trying to fix a broken system with broken tools. We're not the same. But my voice wavered. No? He moved toward me, slow and deliberate. You work within a system you know is corrupt. You help rich men buy justice while poor people drown in legal fees they can't afford. You tell yourself you're changing it from the inside, but every day you compromise a little more. Every settlement you file, every NDA you witness, every guilty man you help walk free. It chips away at the person you thought you'd be. Each word was a scalpel, cutting through my carefully constructed defenses. That's not fair. It's the truth. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to touch but giving me space to breathe. I don't operate in gray areas, Layla. I don't pretend my hands are clean. Every life I've taken, every law I've broken, I own it. Can you say the same about the justice you serve? Tears burned behind my eyes because he was right. God help me, he was right. I'd spent 3 years telling myself I was different from the lawyers who defended monsters, but I'd helped them do it. I'd buried evidence in paperwork, crafted NDAs that silenced victims, all while telling myself it was temporary, that I'd fix it once I had my degree. I can't be with you, I whispered. Even if you're right, even if the system is broken, I can't cross that line. I'd lose everything I've worked for, then go. His voice was gentle, final. Walk out that door and become the lawyer you think you need to be. Put guys like me in jail. Sleep easy knowing you're on the right side of the law. He paused, and his eyes held mine with devastating intensity. But remember this. The law didn't protect you when you needed it. I did. The law won't keep Ricci from hunting you. But I would have. Would have? The past tense felt like a death sentence. I'm pulling my protection completely. No more shadows, no more guards, no more interference in your life. You wanted your freedom, Bella. It's yours. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is a contact. Someone who can relocate you if Ricci comes. A life far from here, far from me. Take it. I stared at the envelope like it was a snake. You're really letting me go. I'm releasing you from my world. What Ricci does with that information is beyond my control. He set the envelope on the table between us. I hope the law you believe in protects you better than I could. Then he walked past me toward the door, and panic clawed up my throat. Nino, wait. He stopped, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You made your choice. Now live with it. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. I stood alone in the amber light, staring at the envelope, feeling the weight of freedom press down on my chest like a tombstone. I'd won. I'd walked away from the monster, reclaimed my life, stayed true to my principles. So why did victory taste like ashes and regret? I lasted 4 days. 4 days of checking door locks 3 times before bed, 4 days of varying my route to work, never taking the same coffee shop twice, sitting with my back to the wall in every public space. 4 days of telling myself the prickling sensation between my shoulder blades was paranoia, not intuition. Maya had stopped trying to convince me to use Nino's relocation contact. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a coiled snake, and every time I looked at it, I heard his voice. The law won't keep Ricci from hunting you, but I would have. I was walking home from the bodega on Thursday evening, just 3 blocks, broad daylight, plenty of witnesses, when I realized how thoroughly I'd miscalculated everything. The white van was so ordinary I almost didn't notice it. Contractor logos on the side, the kind that blended into the city's background noise. It rolled past me once, and some animal part of my brain screamed danger, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. This was my neighborhood. My street. Nothing happened here in the golden hour before sunset. The van circled back. I quickened my pace, my grocery bag banging against my hip. 2 more blocks. My building was right there, close enough to see Mrs. Chen watering her plants on the 2nd floor fire escape, close enough that if I screamed, someone would hear. The van pulled alongside me, and the side door slid open with a sound like a blade being drawn. 2 men, ski masks. One grabbed my arm before I could process what was happening, yanking me toward the open door with brutal efficiency. My grocery bag hit the pavement, apples scattering into the gutter. I opened my mouth to scream, but a gloved hand clamped over my face, muffling the sound into nothing. Quiet, and you don't get hurt, a voice growled in my ear, thick with an accent I couldn't place through my panic. Struggle, and we make this painful. I struggled anyway. Some desperate part of me remembered every self-defense class I'd half paid attention to in college. Go for the eyes, the throat, make noise, be difficult. I clawed at the hand over my mouth, kicked backward, tried to make myself dead weight. But there were 2 of them, and they were professionals. Within seconds I was inside the van, the door slamming shut, and we were moving before anyone on the street could react. Someone had seen. Mrs. Chen was screaming from her fire escape. A man was running after the van, phone in hand, probably already dialing 911. But none of it mattered because we were accelerating, weaving through traffic, and the man holding me down pressed something cold and metal against my ribs. I said quiet. The gun made his suggestion a certainty. They zip-tied my wrists behind my back, the plastic biting into my skin. Threw a hood over my head, plunging me into suffocating darkness. The van took turns too fast, and I slid across the floor, my shoulder slamming into something hard. Pain bloomed bright and sharp, but I bit down on the inside of my cheek to keep from making a sound. Showing fear felt like giving them power I couldn't afford to surrender. Time became meaningless under the hood. We could have driven for 20 minutes or 2 hours, I had no way to know. All I knew was the smell of oil and metal, the rough texture of the van floor against my cheek, and the suffocating certainty that I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Nino had tried to tell me. He'd shown me the file, explained what Ricci did to women he used as leverage, and I'd walked away anyway, choosing my pride over my survival, convinced that freedom from Nino's protection meant freedom from danger. I'd been so fucking stupid. The van finally stopped. Hands grabbed me, hauled me out into air that smelled like rust and decay. I was inside somewhere, a warehouse maybe, or a garage somewhere. The sounds echoed wrong and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. They shoved me into a chair, and someone cut the zip ties only to replace them with rope, binding my wrists to the chair arms with professional precision. When they finally ripped off the hood, the light was blinding. I blinked away tears, trying to focus, and gradually the room came into view. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling like a judgment, and standing in front of me, wearing a smile that made my stomach turn to ice, was a man I recognized from the case files I'd pretended not to read too carefully. Don Ricci was smaller than I'd expected. Soft around the middle, expensive suit that couldn't quite disguise the weakness underneath, but his eyes held the kind of cruelty that didn't need muscle to back it up. This was a man who hurt people because he enjoyed it, not because he had to. The girl in the yellow dress. His voice was reedy, almost pleasant. I've been very curious about you, Miss Sutherland. It's not often someone strikes Nino Amando and lives long enough for me to meet them. I said nothing. Anything I said could be used against me or against Nino. My legal training was useless here, but at least it gave me the sense to shut up. Ricci circled me slowly, like a shark evaluating prey. You must be very special, very precious, for Nino to break every rule he's ever made about keeping women out of his business. Do you know what they're calling you in the families? The weakness. His first vulnerability in 30 years. I'm not with him anymore. The words came out steadier than I felt. We're done. Whatever you think I mean to him, you're wrong. Oh, I know you left him. That's why you're here. He stopped in front of me, bending down until we were eye level. His breath smelled like expensive wine and rot. If you were still under his protection, I'd never have gotten within a mile of you. But you made it so easy. Walking home alone, no guards, no weapons, completely vulnerable. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear with false tenderness. You gift-wrapped yourself for me. The truth of it hit me like a freight train. Nino hadn't been controlling me with those guards. He'd been keeping me alive. Every restriction I'd railed against, every loss of freedom I'd resented, it had been the only thing standing between me and this moment. What do you want? I asked, hating how my voice shook. Simple. I want you to make a phone call. Tell Nino where you are. Tell him if he wants you back, he comes alone. No guards, no backup, no tricks. Ricci's smile widened. He'll come, of course. That's what makes you so valuable. The untouchable Nino Amando will walk into an obvious trap for the girl who slapped him. He won't. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. He would come. Not because I'd asked, but because his code, whatever twisted honor guided him, wouldn't let him do anything else. I was his weakness, and Ricci was going to use me to destroy him. Let's test that theory. Ricci nodded to one of his men, who approached with a phone. You're going to call him. You're going to sound appropriately terrified, which shouldn't be hard. And you're going to deliver my message. If you warn him, if you try anything clever, my men have orders to start removing fingers until you cooperate. Understand? I understood perfectly. I was bait, and the trap was already set. The man held the phone to my ear, already dialing. It rang once, twice. Then Nino's voice, rough and immediate. Layla? Just my name. But I heard everything in it, relief that I'd called. Fear about why I was calling. The barely controlled violence of someone who already knew this conversation would end in blood. Nino. My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ricci's hand came down on my shoulder, squeezing hard enough to bruise. A reminder. I'm at a warehouse. East side, I think. Near the docks. Ricci says. I swallowed hard, tasting copper. He says if you want me back, you come alone. Silence on the other end. Then soft and deadly. Put him on. Ricci took the phone, his smile victorious. Nino. It's been too long. I couldn't hear Nino's response, but I saw Ricci's expression flicker just for a moment from triumph to something that looked almost like doubt. Yes, she's unharmed. For now. Whether she stays that way depends entirely on. Ricci paused, listening. His smile evaporated completely. You're in no position to make threats. I have your weakness. You're precious. Whatever Nino said next made Ricci's face go pale. He lowered the phone slowly, staring at it like it had bitten him. Then he looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He's already here, Ricci whispered. The lights went out. In the darkness, I heard gunfire, shouting, the wet sound of violence that would haunt my nightmares. Someone screamed. Something heavy hit the floor. And through it all, I sat tied to that chair, blind and terrified, and suddenly understanding the most important truth about Nino Amando. He'd let me go because I'd asked. But he'd never stopped protecting me. He'd just been waiting for Ricci to make his move. The darkness lasted 3 seconds. Then emergency lights kicked on, bathing everything in red, and I saw him. Nino stood in the doorway like an avenging angel carved from violence and vengeance. His white shirt was already painted crimson, hanging open to reveal the full canvas of tattoos that covered his chest and abdomen, a roadmap of sin and survival that seemed to pulse in the emergency lighting. Blood spattered his face, his hands, his neck. None of it was his. Behind him, bodies littered the floor. Ricci's men, the ones who'd grabbed me, the ones who'd tied me to this chair, all of them down, some groaning, most silent. Marco and Vinny materialized from the shadows like wolves, weapons drawn, efficiently finishing what Nino had started. But Nino only had eyes for me. He crossed the warehouse in 4 long strides, and I watched death itself walk toward me, wearing the face of the man I'd pushed away. His hands were gentle when they reached for the ropes binding my wrists, a stark contradiction to the violence still humming through his body. The blade he used to cut through the bindings appeared from nowhere, razor sharp, and I didn't flinch even when it came within inches of my skin. Did they hurt you? His voice was barely controlled, each word bitten off like he was chewing glass. Layla, Look at me. Did they touch you? No. I'm okay. But I wasn't okay. The adrenaline was crashing, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't feel my fingers. How did you know? How did you get here so fast? Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or resignation. I never stopped watching you. The moment you walked away from Dante's, I put my best shadows on you. Invisible, untraceable, but always there. He finished cutting the ropes and pulled me to my feet, steadying me when my legs threatened to give out. I told you I was releasing you from my protection. I lied. The admission should have made me angry, should have felt like a violation. Instead, it felt like the only honest thing anyone had said to me in days. Ricci, I started, but Nino's expression went dark. Is handled. Or we'll be in. He checked his watch, somehow still pristine despite the carnage. Approximately 4 minutes when Marco finishes with his guard detail. As if summoned, gunfire erupted from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. Ricci's voice rose in a scream that cut off abruptly. I didn't want to know what Marco had done. Didn't want to catalog the sounds of violence that filtered through the walls like a symphony of retribution. Nino's hand came up to cup my face, and I realized his fingers were trembling. This man, this monster who'd just torn through a dozen armed men like they were paper, was shaking as he touched me. I thought I'd lost you. The words were raw, stripped of the smooth control he usually wore like armor. When I got the call that they'd grabbed you off the street, that I'd been 3 minutes too slow. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, I saw something that terrified me more than Ricci ever could. Vulnerability. I would have burned this entire city down to find you. You did find me. I'm okay. You're not okay. You're traumatized and tied to me forever because Ricci made you a symbol. Every rival, every ambitious lieutenant, every punk who wants to prove themselves, they all know now that you're my weakness. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, smearing blood I hadn't realized was there. You can't walk away from this, Layla. Not anymore. The only question is whether you walk forward with me or spend the rest of your life running from the target I painted on your back. Before I could respond, Vinny appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath, his suit jacket torn. Boss, Ricci's secured. Building's clear. We need to move before NYPD shows up. They're maybe 10 minutes out. Nino nodded but didn't take his eyes off me. Can you walk? Yes, I think so. He kept one arm around my waist anyway, supporting me as we moved through the warehouse. I tried not to look at the bodies, tried not to catalog the ways Nino and his men had dismantled Ricci's operation with surgical precision. But I saw enough. Saw the efficiency of violence, the brutal mathematics of a man protecting what was his. The SUV was waiting outside, engine running. Nino guided me into the back seat and slid in beside me, immediately pulling me against his chest, like he needed the physical confirmation that I was real, alive, safe. His heart hammered against my ear, too fast, too hard, and I realized he wasn't as controlled as he pretended. Where are we going? My voice sounded small, distant. Somewhere safe. My place. Ricci's people are scattered now, but I'm not taking chances. His hand moved through my hair, repetitive and soothing, like he was calming himself as much as me. You'll stay with me until I've eliminated every threat. No arguments. No discussion. This isn't negotiable. I should have fought him. Should have insisted on my independence, my apartment, my life. But the memory of those hands grabbing me, the hood over my head, Ricci's smile as he'd outlined his plan, it was all too fresh. And sitting here in Nino's arms, feeling his heartbeat gradually slow, breathing in the scent of cedar and smoke and copper, I realized something fundamental had shifted. Real talk, Nino just went to war for Layla. Risked everything, his empire, his life, all for loyalty. That's what real ones do. They show up when it matters. If you're the type who rides or die for the people you love, drop loyalty forever in the comments right now. If you're the type who disappears when things get hard, keep scrolling. We know who you are. The drive took 20 minutes, winding through parts of the city I didn't recognize until we pulled into an underground garage beneath a building that screamed old money and new power. Nino's penthouse took up the entire top floor, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern luxury that somehow still felt warm, lived in. Not a bachelor pad. A home. He led me to a bathroom that was bigger than my bedroom, all marble and chrome, and a shower that could fit 6 people. Clean up. There are clothes in the closet probably too big, but they'll work until I can get your things tomorrow. I'll be right outside if you need anything. Nino. He turned back, and in the bathroom's bright light, I finally saw him clearly. The blood covering him, the wild intensity in his eyes that hadn't quite faded, the way his tattoos seemed to tell the story of tonight's violence before it had even happened. He looked like a god of war and ruin, beautiful and terrible, and I understood why people whispered his name like a prayer and a curse. "Thank you," I said, "for coming, for everything." His smile was slow, dangerous, possessive. He crossed back to me in 2 strides, backing me against the marble counter, his hands braced on either side of my hips. Up close, I could see the flecks of blood on his face, the slight split in his lip where someone had landed a lucky hit, the way his pupils were still blown wide with adrenaline. "I told you," he murmured, his mouth hovering just above mine. "You're mine, Layla. You were mine the moment you slapped me in that club. You were mine when you walked away. You were mine when Ricci's animals put their hands on you." His nose brushed against mine, intimate and claiming. "The only difference between then and now is that you finally understand what that means. And what does it mean? It means I will destroy anyone who tries to take you from me. It means you live in my world now, under my protection, by my side. It means—" His hand came up to wrap gently around my throat, not squeezing, just holding, just reminding me of his power and his restraint, that I am the monster you need. Not the monster you want, not the monster you think you deserve, but the monster who will keep you alive when the world tries to tear you apart. I'm supposed to put monsters like you in jail. But my voice was breathless, my pulse jumping against his palm. "Then I guess you'll have to decide," he said, his lips brushing the corner of my mouth with devastating gentleness. "Whether you want to be a lawyer, or whether you want to live." He released me and stepped back, leaving me gasping against the counter, my entire body trembling with things I didn't want to name. "Clean up. We'll talk more when you're ready. But Layla?" He paused in the doorway, looking back over his shoulder. "Running isn't an option anymore. So stop fighting what we both know is inevitable, and accept that the safest place in this city is right here, with me." The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I stood alone in his bathroom, staring at my reflection. My hair was a mess, mascara smudged beneath my eyes, a bruise already forming on my shoulder. I looked like someone who'd been to war. I looked like someone who belonged to Nino Amando. And God help me, I wasn't sure I wanted to fight it anymore. I found him on the balcony an hour later. The city sprawled beneath us like a kingdom of lights and shadows. He'd showered too, his hair still damp, the blood washed away to reveal the man underneath the violence. He wore black slacks and nothing else, his tattoos on full display in the ambient glow from the penthouse. A tumbler of whiskey dangled from his fingers, and he stared out at the skyline like he was counting the cost of tonight's war. "You're bleeding," I said softly, stepping through the glass doors. The night air was cool against my skin, and I'd found one of his shirts in the closet, white cotton that hung to my thighs, smelling like cedar in him. He glanced down at his side where blood had soaked through in a thin line. "It's nothing, just a graze. Let me see." I crossed to him, and when he didn't move, I set my hand on his chest and felt his heart still beating too fast. "Nino, let me see it." He set down the whiskey and turned to face me fully. And in the moonlight I could map every scar, every mark, every story his skin told. The wound was along his ribs, not deep, but angry and still seeping. Someone had gotten close. Too close. "First aid kit?" I asked. "Kitchen, under the sink." I found it easily. A professional-grade kit that said this wasn't the first time he'd needed to patch himself up at home. When I returned, he'd moved to sit on one of the lounge chairs, legs spread, arms braced on his knees like he was suddenly too tired to stand. I knelt between his legs, opening the kit, pulling out antiseptic and gauze. My hands should have been shaking. I'd just been kidnapped, nearly used as bait. I watched this man turn into death incarnate, but as I cleaned the wound with careful precision, I felt steady, grounded. This close, I could see the faint scar on his collarbone, the newer one across his ribs from some previous violence, the way his muscles tensed and released under my touch. "You're good at this," he said quietly, watching me work. "Maya made me take a wilderness first aid course. She said if I was going to date lawyers, I needed to know how to handle blood." I smiled despite everything. "Didn't think I'd be using it on a mob boss." "Crime lord," he corrected with the ghost of a smile. "Mob boss is so gauche." I laughed, actually laughed, and the sound felt like breaking a spell. His hand came up to cradle my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with that same devastating gentleness he used like a weapon. "I thought I lost you tonight," he said. "In those 3 minutes between getting the call and finding you, I thought about all the ways Ricci could hurt you, all the ways I'd failed you by letting you walk away. You didn't fail me. I failed myself. I pressed gauze against the wound, taping it carefully. I convinced myself that freedom from you meant safety, that the law would protect me better than you could. I was wrong about everything. Not everything. His other hand tangled in my hair, tilting my face up to meet his eyes. You were right that my world is dangerous, that being with me means becoming a target, that this, he gestured between us, goes against everything you thought you believed in. Then why does it feel like the only honest choice I've ever made? He kissed me then, and it wasn't gentle. It was claiming, consuming, a confirmation of everything we'd been circling since that night at the Onyx. His hands pulled me closer, and I went willingly, climbing into his lap, feeling the proof of his restraint in every controlled movement. He kissed me like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like my surrender was the only thing that could quiet the violence still humming through his veins. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. Stay. Not just tonight. Really stay. Move in here. Let me protect you properly. Stop pretending you can exist in your world while I exist in mine. I have conditions. My voice was steadier than I felt. His laugh was surprised. Genuine. Of course you do. You're a paralegal. Everything's a negotiation. I'm serious. I pulled back enough to look him in the eye. If I stay, if I really do this, I need purpose. I can't just be the girl you keep safe in a tower. I need to matter. You matter to me. I need to matter to your empire. I took a breath, the paralegal in me organizing thoughts into arguments. You said you protect the neighborhoods the law forgets. You said you fill the cracks the system left behind. So let me help you legitimize it. Let me find the legal loopholes, the gray areas, the ways to turn your protection into something the law can't touch. He studied me for a long moment, and I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. You want to be my consigliere. I want to be your partner, the one who makes sure you can keep helping people without spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder for the RICO task force. I spread my hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat under my palms. You said we're the same two people trying to fix a broken system with broken tools, so let me use my tools to protect yours. And your law degree? Your dreams of prosecution? Were never really mine, I admitted. They were the dreams of someone who thought the system worked. But I've seen enough now to know better. The law doesn't serve justice, Nino. It serves power. So maybe instead of trying to change it from the inside, I build something better from the outside. With you. His smile was slow, dangerous, proud. My brilliant, complicated girl, already planning how to make a criminal empire legal. Not legal, untouchable. There's a difference. He kissed me again, softer this time. And when he pulled back, his eyes held something I'd never seen before. Not just desire or possession, but something that looked dangerously like hope. I have something for you, he said. Stay here. He disappeared into the penthouse, and I stood on the balcony alone, the city lights blurring as exhaustion finally caught up with the adrenaline. When he returned, he held a small black box that made my heart stutter. Nino, let me do this right. He dropped to one knee on his own balcony, and the absurdity of it, a crime lord proposing to a paralegal hours after massacring his rivals, should have been horrifying. Instead, it felt inevitable. Layla Sutherland, you walked into my club in a yellow dress and slapped me in front of my entire crew. You challenged everything I thought I knew about control and power and weakness. You made me feel human again. And tonight, when I thought I'd lost you, I realized that building an empire means nothing if you're not in it. He opened the box, and I gasped. The ring was stunning, a yellow diamond, brilliant and rare, set in platinum with smaller stones cascading down the band. The exact shade of the dress from that first night, captured in stone and light. I had this made the day after you slapped me, he continued. Before I knew your name, before I knew you'd walk away, before any of this, I knew then what I know now. You're mine, and I'm yours, and everything else is just details we'll figure out together. That's insane, I whispered. Probably, but tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me you're not standing here planning how to legitimize my empire because you've already decided to stay. Tell me, his voice dropped to that dark whisper that made my spine tingle, that you don't want to be Layla Amando, the woman who turned a criminal into a king. I couldn't tell him that, because it would be a lie. Yes, I said, and the word felt like jumping off a cliff and learning to fly on the way down. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll stay. I'll build something with you that the law can't touch and the world can't break. He slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, of course it did. Nino Amando didn't do anything by half measures. Then he stood and pulled me into his arms, holding me like I was the most precious thing he'd ever stolen. "I love you," he said against my hair. "My weakness, my strength, my girl in the yellow dress." "I love you too," I admitted, the words both surrender and victory. My monster, my protector, my Nino. Below us, the city hummed with life and crime and justice that served the powerful. But up here, in the arms of the man I'd slapped and judged and ultimately chosen, I felt something I'd never felt working within the system. I felt like I could actually change the world. We stood there as dawn crept over the skyline, planning our future in whispers and kisses and promises that would have horrified the paralegal I used to be. But that girl was gone. She died the moment Ricci's men grabbed her off the street and shown her that the law's protection was an illusion. The woman who remained the one wearing a yellow diamond and Nino Amando's shirt, already mentally cataloging the legal loopholes that could turn a criminal empire into an untouchable legacy. She was something new, something dangerous, something free. And as Nino's lips found mine again, sealing our bargain with a kiss that tasted like smoke and cedar and forever, I couldn't bring myself to regret a single slap, a single choice, a single moment that had led me here. To him, to us, to the beginning of everything.